At the end of the day, it's not about what you have or even what you've accomplished. It's about what you've done with those accomplishments. It's about who you've lifted up, who you've made better. It's about what you've given back. Denzel Washington. Welcome to Inspire Vision. Our sole purpose is to elevate the lives of others and to inspire you to do the same.
Andrea Wehlann, how are you doing?
I'm doing good today, Doug. Thank you. And thank you for having me back on your show for the second time.
Oh, it's great. We had so much fun last time. And, you've written so many different books. In fact, it's really interesting. I started to play golf a little bit again, and I am not a great golfer, right? And so I went to the driving range and I was, practicing. And every time I took my driver, which is, the main one you use off the tee, I couldn't even get a decent hit. And the fellow that was there, that's actually a professional coach, I pulled him over and I said, look, can you help me with this? And he looked at it and I kept slicing and doing everything else. And he finally took my driver and kind of wiggled it back and forth. And he says, let me find you a different driver. And so he went into his office and came back with one. And the ones that I was using, I purchased here in Thailand. So, they weren't necessarily great. But he brought me one that's made in the US that is a really high-end driver. And wow, I used that and all of a sudden, boom, there it is. And what came to my mind about that, Andrea, is that, you have written so many different books. You've got the poems, and I want you to talk about those and different things. And I realized, it's interesting. Everybody is going to have a different situation and a different solution to help them with that situation. And what you have done is you have done different solutions in many respects to similar situations. So what I'd like you to do is just introduce yourself again to the audience and talk about the books that you've written, and then we'll go from there.
I appreciate how you blended that together and that you noticed that. Those are things that I can't see by myself, but I really appreciate hearing that from you, and that's your insight. That's wonderful. I have published 3 books in 3 years, and we can talk about how they all tie together. Because when I first started the first book, No Matter How Dark the Stain, Poems and Inspiration for the Woman in Pain, I had no idea how that the next book would come and that the next book would come. But now as I'm sitting here, I can see how it was like a divine kind of plan, how they all meld together and how they all can really help heal hearts and change the world for the better within people. So the second book I wrote is the one we spoke about last time, Deeper Days. Deeper Days is 365 yoga inspirations for inner calm amidst chaos. So that one came out in 2022, just after No Matter How Dark the Stain came out in 2021. Recently, August 31st, in 2023, I published Stillness in the Storm, a conscious daily journal of yoga and spiritual healing. This instantly became #1 bestseller in the topic of yoga, #2 in mental health the day it came out.
Wow.
So it's very exciting for me.
Well, and, again, it's because I'm sure there's going to be some people that didn't hear the first interview. I'd love for you to share with the audience, what were your experiences that brought you to this point where you've been writing these books, and obviously your goal is to help individuals who have really experienced trauma in their lives?
So I'm really inspired by Joseph Campbell and the hero's journey. And I started to notice at a really young age that a lot of extraordinary experiences were happening to me. And at the time, I fought it. I had resistance. I cried. I tried suicide. I tried to escape it. Why me? I think I cried every day through high school. And during all of those times, I always had the gift of writing. So from age 7, I was writing poetry through all of the experiences that I was having. So it's on one hand, I had this, what I felt was terrible, bad seed, hell, the way some people would understand it, no self-esteem. And on the other hand, I was able to see through the pen on my paper that there was this divine guidance, because the words I was writing in the poetry was so beyond my grade. What was I at age 7? Like in grade school, it was so beyond my intellect, but I could see the vocabulary that I didn't hear that at home. So I had, so then take that to now being 1920. And this is still happening. A little bit of hell, a little bit of heaven, depending on how you see things. And I just really started to put together that these experiences are happening for a reason. They keep happening. There's a pattern here. And that's why I really went into study. How can I break the pattern? Can I? How do I heal this so it doesn't keep continuing? Because I really felt that I was going to die. But then on the one hand, I had this poetry that was coming from God or source or something bigger than me.
Well, and, and isn't it interesting that, through all that you were going through, you finally had that awareness that, you know what, I've got to change something, or life isn't going to be what it's meant to be. And
I think,
go ahead.
Yeah, I think there's patterns that keep showing up. So I had some sexual things happen to me from men in grade school, and I was like, okay, that's weird, disturbing, traumatizing. Okay, it's just me, it's my fault, And then take that to university, same thing. Somebody put the Rohypnol drug in my drink. Couple years later, I'm on a trip in Mexico. Same thing. The bartenders were in cahoots with the locals. I had one sip and that Rohypnol was in there, and I could have died then too. Take that again. Then I have this high position job, and I'm a woman there, and I'm sexually assaulted by one of the long-term employees. I mean, at what point, like, I had to stop and realize I'm the bottom line in all of that. There's a pattern happening here.
Well,
so,
and, I'm going to interrupt you there so I don't forget what I wanted to ask.
The thought that I had was how often, and you made mention of this, that the pattern and everything that you were experiencing was a pattern that you were taking some type of personal responsibility for. But that was only, once you reached an age of awareness to the point where you were able to look at that and think, wow, this is happening. And I think there's so many individuals, both men and women, that regardless of what's going on in their life, they're experiencing things that are not what they want. And they blame this person, they blame this situation, they do all of those types of things. And yet what you said, and the thing that I have just learned, from different people as I've been doing this podcast, is that we are responsible, and literally we attract into our lives those things that we have expected and that we've not eliminated from that subconscious mind. And therefore we keep experiencing and we keep experiencing, and we never really take the opportunity to say, you know what, I'm going to take responsibility for this. I've got to figure out what's going on in my mind and my emotions that is attracting this type of activity. Would you mind commenting on that?
I agree. I mean, after it kept happening, because there's things associated with that. So once that kept happening, I was more angry. I was more bitter. I was blaming. I think I I tried drinking vodka for a year. And then what I started to see, I believe that the person in front of you is a mirror, a reflection of who you are. And what I started to see was people's faces. They didn't want to see me. I was making people upset. They were angry. And that I started to see was, if I let that continue, I am no different than the people who did stuff to me. My future will be no different. It's all pre-written, that life path. And I could see that clearly, and I made a conscious choice to switch things around. I booked myself into anger management classes at my university. I would write the local spiritual retreat centers, and I wrote them letters, and I said, here's a list of 17 horrible things that happened to me. So I know I'm going to be damaged if I don't fix it. I don't have the 500 or however much to pay to come in, but I need help. Can you please let me in? And I would do silent retreats on the weekend. And just those little glimpses started to open up a new life for me. I started to realize that I could break the patterns of what was happening. I realized I could control my anger. Yeah.
Well, and once you broke the patterns, have you found that you're not attracting those experiences anymore?
Interesting. So there's one little glitch I found in that beautiful matrix. So I really, really transformed. So I heard once Dr. Phil say that for every I hate you, you need 10 I love you to counter out that I hate you. So I am a woman who, because I was scared of men, I went to Brazil and learned the art of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu just to really make sure that I would not be scared. Like I said, I checked myself into retreats. I went to New York City. I did everything that ever scared me, turned it around. And then I studied all of the ancient trainings that I could. I joined the Canadian Theosophical Society. I studied Feng Shui, tarot cards, Reiki healing. I walked on hot coals. I did trainings with Dr. Eric Pearl, reconnective healing, a fourth dimension, fifth dimensional healing, yoga by 3 different teachers, just because I really wanted to counteract and change the patterns. And then, so I really thought, okay, now I've got some love in myself. Now I've switched things around. And what I didn't realize, sadly, is that there is one personality that I wasn't taught about. And I wholeheartedly believe that because I had kind of come from hell, turned it around and found love, that was all I could receive. But I wasn't aware that there are predators that look for people like that. And they will kind of sneak in and kind of take you for all you have. And so I did have that experience afterwards. But I feel like I've got the lessons now.
Well, and isn't it interesting that we tend to put out that energy, as you said, sometimes, and this is so tough. I can't even imagine. All right. I've not experienced it. So again, it's really tough for me to totally understand. But what fascinates me is that we tend to put that energy out. And you're right, the predators or even the experiences. I know one individual who constantly puts out this energy, constantly experiences all of these. And I'm not going to tell you, it's not sexual stuff, but it's just in general, not having success in their lives. And I watch them and observe that they keep experiencing it because they're not willing to, number one, even be aware that it's their responsibility. It's always somebody else. And it fascinates me that we don't realize that we put out the energy and we create the life. Dr. Joe Dispenza, who you and I have talked about before, because he's so big on meditation, but he has literally, done this with some professors in Southern California, San Diego, where they are now measuring brainwaves, they're measuring everything, and they have found that, in fact, there is a physiological explanation and a scientific explanation to how people can literally change their lives change that
Yes.
movie that they're experiencing in their life,
Yes.
because they're able, whatever process they use in order to do that. And I think it's important for people to understand that, guess what? We are responsible for what we're experiencing. But if we're willing to have the courage, like you obviously had, and the willingness and the curiosity to explore and to seek and to try to figure it out, your energy changes and suddenly your life changes.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and
I
let's
guess
go ahead.
No, after you. Yep.
Well, and let's talk about your first book where you're writing poems. It's interesting because, you know, there are books that say, all right, step by step, this is how you need to do it. And and I've interviewed some authors that have written
You're right.
stories that are fictional, and yet there's a purpose behind that, and all of a sudden it's totally affecting people. Now for you, it's these poems, and as you say, you know, no matter how dark the stain, these are poems that you have written. And I'd love for you to share, you know, because there's 3 different sections, right, in the book.
Yeah.
And I'd love for you to share what those are and what your experience has been with people, if you've had some feedback, which I'm sure you have, as far as what does that do for people who are experiencing those traumas in their lives as they read those poems? How does that help them?
Yeah. So let me tell you what I've had these poems, and I wrote through everything that I went through in my life. That was my best friend, was any pen and paper, toilet paper. When I was a waitress, it was the waitress cards. They're still sitting beside me. They're full of words. I was always channeling. Now, but like you said before, I always took it, like blame myself kind of, and held it to myself. And here's what pushed this book out. In 2021, when the pandemic happened, now everyone had to stay home. And here's what I heard. Domestic violence phone calls for the police went up 60%, like 660. So here I am sitting with poems I wrote through all of that kind of like violence and all the things that happen to women. I have the words. So there's 60% of women who are calling police for help, who are stuck in these situations. And I know how they felt. I'm sure they feel scared, ashamed. They don't know where to go. There's no help for them. And who am I not to put this book out? That's what made me put the book together, so that no matter how dark the stain, no matter how bad it is that happened, those women need to know that there's a light inside of them, that they are still destiny despite what happened to them. Things happen, but it's not who they are. And I imagine a world where all of those women are exactly their full potential. And I'm reading the books that they want to write and the songs that they want to sing. So the 3 sections in No Matter How Dark the Stain, I made very simple. One is the innocence. And that's like grade school or going to high school. You're just innocent and, you know, having fun and just who you are. And the second chunk of poetry here is called That's the Thing About the Heart, It Breaks. And that's the stuff you run into. For me, it was rape, sexual assault. You know, I dealt things with alcoholism, friendships, schooling, high school, suicide, all of those kind of things that, you know, you don't read about in the Berenstain Bears books when you're a kid. So there's a section for that. The last section of the book is Rise of the Goddess. I've been in all 3 spots. But here's the beautiful thing about poetry. Right in the beginning, there is a Greek word for imitation, and it's called mimesis. And Plato's theory of mimesis was that all forms of art are imitation of life, of an idea, of reality. Mimesis allows us to explore the relationship with our inner self, our emotions, beyond what's possible in the real world. In poetry, a form of mimesis, the words are written at one point in time, read at another point in time. And through this mind-to-mind, heart-to-heart experience, the reader finds that he or she is transformed. So, if there's a lady, say, who's lost a baby, which happens, but we don't talk about it all the time. In the second part of the book, there's words. Now, for her to know that these are the words when that happens, someone else has felt this, not just you. And in her hearing that or having words to her trauma, that is transforming. That is turning light onto darkness. And where there is light, there can be no darkness, because the mind cannot serve two masters. This is the start of healing. We can handle hard things, but we need to put it in a place. And my wish is that every woman who experienced any sexual assault, reproductive issues, abuse, will have this book in their hand. Or say if your daughter comes home and you think something happened, but she doesn't quite know what to say, that this book is just shows up on the bedside table. Because you can just open it and find where you are and read about it. But also you can see where you came from in the innocence, and you can see where you're going in the rise of the goddess.
Well, and I think that's so amazing that you've done it that way too, because I think that for many people, they may look back at the innocence, they look back and, they may observe what's going on and presently still what's going on. Mm-hmm. And they don't have hope. Hope is so important. And yes, they've lost hope because they don't know that there's a solution. And then with your third section, where all of a sudden, here's the hope. Here's the ability to come out of this situation, to move forward in our lives. And as you say, it's fascinating that as they read that, it's going to impinge in their mind. It's going to impinge in their heart and give them hope. And hopefully it gives them enough strength to say, okay, I'm now aware that there is hope, and I'm aware that, I'm going through this, but I'm aware that I want to change. And at that point in time, then they're able to seek out whatever professional help is going to work for them. And as you say, which I find fascinating, I mean, you did everything to try to figure that out. Now, was there for you, and as I said, when we first started, everybody, I needed to find the right driver for golf in order to at least somewhat correct my swing. And what was it for you? Was there one point, or was it all of those things? Was there one thing that stood out to you that you found really was the most effective in helping you work through that?
Yeah.
What was that?
Alone. I was completely alone.
And what item, what thing, as you went to all of these different things with Reiki and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and, Feng Shui and meditation and yoga, was there one thing that has really been the main help, or have you found that you still need to incorporate many of those things that have been able to then help you?
I feel like at this moment in time, I'm an amalgamation, and I have embodied all of it perfectly, cultivated a life of love, cultivated the cells in my body to vibrate love, the people around me, and the words that I write in my books now touch that heart center. When people come to my yoga classes now, they'll say, I'm not quite sure what it is, but it sounds like love. Like it sounds like your heart. And I know that because I'm coming from such an authentic place in my heart, that that's what they're hearing, that's what they're feeling. And I believe that that's how the world changes. It is heart to heart in yoga, one breath at a time, one poem a day. My Zen Buddhist teacher taught can soften your heart. He always taught, he started with a poem, my Zen Buddhist teacher, and he ended with a poem at the end of every class. And I believe the same thing. I think one poem a day can soften your heart, and just one breath a day, you have a little space to come from a more creative place within yourself. And in that little space is where healing happens, where the cells start to change patterns in the body, where you can take that extra breath, where you realize you're not just who you've been, that you can become something else or become who you'd like to be.
Well, and I kind of laugh because I've tried yoga, and I cannot do it. I just don't have the ability to do all those yoga patterns. I disagree with you.
I disagree with you. I disagree with you, and I'll tell you why. Because I know that you have a copy of Deeper Days, right?
Right.
You have a copy of Deeper Days, and this is yoga right here. Shake it up, set it free, and rise from the ashes. Shake it up, set it free, and rise from the ashes. That's yoga right there in that moment where I connected my head and my heart in that alignment is yogi. That's to yoga, to unite.
Okay, so I'm glad you clarified that, because if I'm understanding what you're saying, yoga is not necessarily all the physical activity, but rather it's a mental, emotional, spiritual activity.
Yes.
And are you able to accomplish the same thing that, quote, yoga is doing by doing either sitting meditation, walking meditation, those type of things? Because what I did with your book is, I had it, and every day I was going to do some walking meditation. I'd look at that.
Yeah.
And that's what I thought about as I was doing that. So do you find that people who, quote, like me, say, well, yoga, I can't do all that physical stuff, but in fact, they can do meditation, which will accomplish similar things?
Yeah. So my backstory is that when I was looking for the healing things, I opened up a newspaper after, I think people were trying to kill me at that point, and I packed my car and drove like 5 cities away, found a newspaper. I didn't want to be messed up from that too. So I opened it up, and in the back section was NLP meditation person looking for students. So I went to his house for 5 years. He ended up being famous. He's on some shows. He made a beautiful course, and he worked with me for 5 years. Before I even went into yoga, I had that meditation piece, and I love it. Yoga is a mind free of disturbances. Yoga is, but what we've seen culturally is all of the asanas, which is postures and poses. When we look at Yoga Journal, we see the people holding their foot over their head. So yoga there's over 260 sutras, and sutra, think of stitches. Sutras are called.
Yes.
And only 3 of them, only 3 out of over 260 from Patanjali are about the postures. There's 8 different components of yoga. There is the yamas, the ethics of yoga, the self-observances, how you see yourself react. Then there's the posture. Then there is, which one's next? Pranayama, the breathing exercises. Then you go to the concentration, which is like Deeper Days, where you can hold your mind on one thought. Once you can hold your mind on one thought, then you have a little campground where you can open to more holding a meditation practice. Once you have that is pratyahara, where you kind of go beyond the senses. You've probably noticed this. You bliss out. It's not about what you're thinking, feeling itchy. There's a state there. It's called pratyahara, and that's one of the limbs. After that is samadhi, a feeling of bliss. And it's not like they go in steps. but it goes around in circles. It's so fascinating.
It is, and I think it's so important for people to understand that are experiencing these emotional traumas and physical traumas that ultimately become major emotional trauma. Is that, and you made the point of the concentration. What came to my mind is, here's the sense of meditation, yoga, concentration to the point where our mind allows us just to focus on one thing. And as we see those emotions coming up, now we're talking about mindset, where you have developed a mindset that as those emotions start to come up, you're able to recognize them and put them to the side because you no longer buy into that. And I love that concept.
I love what you're saying. Here's what I noticed. No matter how dark the stain, shines light on all of those pebbles of the trauma that's within us. And once the light is there, once they come up, they just come up. And then deeper days, then once those pebbles are settled and you have a spot to hold all the things that have happened, then you have deeper days where you can start to concentrate on something else. You can bring new vibes in. You can feel a sense of peace and that you're more, right? You don't get these coming up so much, right? They're not disturbing. And then you have stillness where you can be completely still with yourself. And no matter what's coming, something's always arising. Something's always passing. We never quite get there. Something's always coming. And that's a beautiful dance in the mind. A beautiful dance in the mind. But we need the words. We need the poems. We need to acknowledge. I see people here come to yoga and they'll lay down in yoga and close their eyes. But if it's not dealt with, if you were a jerk to someone in high school, say, or you kicked your mom when you were little, those things are going to come when you're still. You don't know what's coming, and it might shock you, or you might get scared or be surprised. And so some people, they'll come back after 5 years to yoga and be like, oh, I stopped coming because and I get it, because things come up. It's important to shine a light and overturn every stone. And I say it like it's easy, but it's taken me years and stacks and stacks of self-worth and self-inquiry, but it can be done. It can be done.
Well, and amen to that. And, what's interesting is, again, for those people that tend to look at more scientific than they do, other things, is that literally we are changing the neural pathways in our brain, as you say, as those negative things come up, and we mentally change the thought pattern on that. We are literally changing the neural pathways to the point where more positive than negative, and ultimately we can actually put that negative to the side. And now we have those more positive neural pathways, and it changes our lives because we are now in that direction. So as we're getting to the close here, Andrea, what I'd like you to do is, just for less than a minute, I'd like you to share your thoughts with the audience. What would be the message that you want to share with them?
I want to share with you that you don't need to travel to all the places that I've done to do the hard work that I've done. The consciousness has risen, and you can do this yourself. You can use the books as tools, and you have all you need to heal inside of you right now. The peace you find on the mountaintops of Tibet is the peace that you bring there. It's within you. The dark things of your life and the light ones are both love. You are both. You are the darkness, you are the light, and you are absolute love. It's never too late to shine. The greatest illusion is separation. We're not separate. So me doing the work here is just for you to do the work there, and we're all interconnected on this beautiful invisible web of frequencies and vibrations.
Well, and I love that. And you bring up an interesting point, that whether it's the negative or the positive, it's still love. And what's interesting is here you are, you've gone through all of this trauma, and yet you have turned that around to where you are now affecting other people's lives in a positive way. And so as you look back at that, horrible stuff, and you certainly didn't deserve to go through that, yet you have taken that and you've transformed that into love to where you are now touching the lives of other people and making a difference in their lives. And Andrea, I think that is amazing.
I think it's nature. It's nature. Yeah, I'm grateful for every moment. Had none of that happened, I would not be sitting here with you. I'm grateful for every hit, for every experience. Yeah.
Well, and again, thank you again for coming back on the show. And, we're going to do this again because we have some great conversations. I really appreciate it.
I'm so happy to hear that. I thank you so much.
Well, and folks, thanks for listening. And I hope that there's been something that's been said here today that is going to motivate you. Go get those books. They're all on Amazon, right?
They're all on Amazon, yep, or your favorite bookstore. Chapters Indigo if you're in Canada. Barnes & Noble has them online. Amazon is number one for sure.
Okay. Go get those books and start reading, because I can guarantee you, I have experienced that as I read these books, it just makes a change in your heart and in your life. Mm-hmm. So thanks for listening. Hope you'll join us again soon. This is Dr. Doug saying have a wonderful week.